Hello there, welcome to ABC News agtlive. At the age of 85, a Nobel laureate, the teenager-born vs Naipaul, Indian origin author, is no more. And Naipaul is much known for his critical commentary on colonialism, religion and politics. A London-dwelling author has beaten us audio finally on August 12 from the same house. Here's a report. Born in 1932 in Chaguenas, Trinidad and Tobago, to a family of migrants from India, he would later go on to call his country of birth unimportant, uncreative, cynical, a dot on the map. In many ways embodying the contradictions of the post-colonial world, Mr. Naipaul was born of Indian ancestry in Trinidad and went to Oxford University on a scholarship and lived the rest of his life in England, where he forged one of the most illustrious literary careers of the last half-century. He was knighted in 1990s. Naipaul made himself a major writer with a rare single-mindedness of purpose. He also brought this concentration, this ability to observe without seeming to be moved, to the best of his works. Of course, this ability too into poetry. W. H. Auden wrote of W. Yeats. The madness of the world was also essential to Naipaul's oeuvre. But while Yeats, the poet influenced by a romantic sensibility, wore his heart on his literary sleeve, Naipaul kept it deeply hidden. That is why its heart translates into beautiful, lyrical poetry with little humor in it, and Naipaul's heart translates into humorous, ironic, or satirical fiction at its best. Naipaul's death was announced by his wife Nadira Naipaul, to whom he was married for 22 years and who will now be responsible for safeguarding his literary legacy. Naipaul, confined to a wheelchair for several years, had been ill for the past few months. He had once characterized Ayatollah Khomeini's 1989 fatwa on Salman Rushdie after the publication of the Satanic Passage as an extreme form of literary criticism. Among those summoned to Naipaul's bedside as he slipped away was his friend and ardent admirer of many years, Gordie Gregg, who has been editor of the Mail on Sunday for 6 years and is about to take over from Paul Dicker as editor of the sister paper, the Daily Mail. A Hindu, though not observant, Naipaul was a staunch defender of Western civilization. His guiding philosophy was universalism. Repeat. A Hindu, though not observant, Naipaul was a staunch defender of Western civilization. His guiding philosophy was universalism. Ferociously prolific, Mr. Naipaul published a book every year or two for much of his career. His breakthrough was his joyous, deeply autobiographical fourth novel, A House for Mr. Vishwas, which was published in 1961. In 1964, Mr. Naipaul published the first of 3 travels about India, an area of darkness. He found that despite his Indian origins, he did not belong there at all.
So the friendships can be laid out for us, but the mystery of the writing will remain. No amount of documentation, however fascinating, can take us there. The biography of a writer, or even the autobiography, will always have this incompleteness. Proust is a master of happy amplification, and I would like to go back to Against Saint-Beuve just for a little. In fact, Proust writes, it is the secretions of one's innermost self, written in solitude and for oneself alone, that one gives to the public. What one bestows on private life, in conversation, or in those drawing room essays that are scarcely more than conversation in print, is the product of a quite superficial self. not of the innermost self, which one can only recover by putting aside the world and the self that frequents the world. When he wrote that, Proust had not yet found the subject that was to lead him to the happiness of his great literary labor. And you can tell from what I have quoted
Naipaul's death
that he was
was
a man
announced by his
trusting
wife
and
Nadira Naipaul,
waiting
to whom he was married for 22 years, and who will now be responsible for safeguarding his literary legacy. Naipaul, confined to a wheelchair for several years, had been ill for the past few. Bureau Report, ABC News, AGT Live.